So, since you're all settled and all ready to go, can I please introduce the first speaker and your chair and the general organizer of this marvelous conference, Vivienne. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Oh, that's better. So you're awake, so that's good. It's a pleasure to see so many of you here today. You know, when you start out organising an event, you never really know what kind of response that you're going to get. So I really want to say thank you. Thank you for taking the effort and time to be here today. It's going to be a great day because we're going to make it a great day. But it would not be possible. When I start out organising, you'll be surprised to know I have no money. And the Hilton trusts me, it's my fourth year here, so they know we have no money to start off with, and I have to go and look for that sponsorship. And again, without any great effort, Janssen actually agreed to sponsor our conference again this year. And they sponsored us last year, and because, we do appreciate them very, very much. And I would like to invite James Fitzpatrick to the stage just to say a few words. Representing Janssen.
Good morning. As Vivienne said, I'm James Fitzpatrick. I'll literally only be 2 minutes. I just wanted to come up and say thank you all for attending. It makes my job a lot easier to go back into the office and say these kind of events are really worthwhile sponsoring. I'm the patient advocacy lead for Janssen. Some funny faces look at me going, what the hell's a patient advocacy lead? That means that I get to work with NHS partners, patients, patient organisations, and work on projects, sponsor events like today's event, where we think it makes a real difference to patient outcomes and tackling inequalities. Janssen, some of you may know who Janssen are. Probably most of you, I hope, would know who Johnson & Johnson are, and Janssen is part of Johnson & Johnson. And everything we do at Janssen is driven by the Johnson & Johnson credo. And the first line of that credo is, I'm not going to read it because I should not off by heart, our responsibility is first to the doctors, nurses, and patients. It's quite simple. And that drives everything we do. That means that projects we work on, campaigns we collaborate on or lead or sponsor, events like today have to feed back to that credo. Does it make a difference? I know a few familiar faces in the room, and we work on different projects where we look at tackling inequalities, whether they're driven by age, race, gender, geography. And so we're always looking to work with other organisations, partners in the NHS, to tackle those inequalities in the therapy areas we work in. So I'm here for the rest of the morning, so please come up and say hello. If you've got any questions, if you've got an idea, if you've got a particular campaign or project you think would love to talk to Janssen about the support or working with you, please come and say hello. We're delighted that this is the second year that we've sponsored your annual conference. I thank Vivienne for inviting us to sponsor the conference because we see the real difference it makes, enabling many of you to come together to share best practice, to discuss the key topics and looking at tackling inequalities. So I hope you have a great day, have lots of fun, and well done.
Thank you, James. Okay. Ready to start my presentation? So we've entitled this conference today, Race Equality, Seizing the Opportunity. So where are we? Where are we now in terms of race equality in the NHS? And for those of you who've attended conferences in the past, I stand here, I give the presentation, I tell you about all the evidence around it. And when I was thinking about what my approach would be today, I thought, I'm not going to do that today. I'm actually just going to have a conversation with you, albeit a one-way one. But I'm just going to have that conversation. Where are we in 2015 with regards to race equality in the NHS? Well, sadly, we're not that much further along than we were in 2008. In 2008, I, as chair of the South East Coast BME network, we carried out a review of all the South East Coast BME network, carried out a review of all the 27 organisations in the South East Coast. And the review was in terms of what was their delivery on race equality. And it made headline news in the Health Service Journal because we found that BME staff were disproportionately represented on grievances, disciplinary, bullying and harassment, capability, employment tribunals, disproportionately. And that means that there were more that were being disciplined than you would expect from the proportion in the workforce. Now, I think the Health Service Journal thought it was just a thing in the South East Coast. So they took the template and they looked at 232 organisations across England and Wales. And this was the headline news. Survey shows racism alive in the NHS. And Roger's here today, Roger Klein, doing his workshop. And you know Roger in his Snowy White Peaks last year actually showed exactly the same picture. It's not much better for patients either. So we've really not moved very far. And I know there may be people in the room that say, oh, Vivienne, we've seen this slide so many times before. We keep going back to the same thing. We must never forget where we're coming from. And we must have an appreciation about where we're at if we really want to know where we're going. So no matter how many times people say the BMEs harp on about, oh, it's not good for them, we are not going to stop until things change. So it is important to know where we're at. And it's interesting to see how the system reacted to the Snowy White Peaks last year. It was almost as if, this is news to us. We've never heard this before. No, you've heard it before. It just hasn't changed. And the response of the NHS to institutional racism, I mean, there's been numerous initiatives, and I'm sure that most of you in this room will probably recognise all of those that are on the list. And yet, when we were asked as a network to be involved in consultation around the equality delivery system, as a network, as the BME beneficiaries, if we didn't exist, you wouldn't need the race equality duty. So how are you the system, going to talk about delivering race equality without any meaningful engagement with us? We said that EDS didn't work, so is it any surprise that it didn't? But they implemented it anyway. Then we had version 2. It made not the slightest bit of difference. And now we've had the recognition that we need to do something over and above, and we're going to have the race equality, or we have the race equality standard that was actually implemented on the 1st of April this year. Now, it's not much better for patients. There's ethnic health inequalities. It was recognised by Akerson when he did a review on health inequalities back in 1998. He made 3 recommendations for reducing ethnic health inequalities. There was the Black report before the Akerson report, but it didn't really look at the ethnic health inequalities. It said we need to have policies on reducing socioeconomic inequalities that should consider the needs of BME groups. The policies should consider the needs of BME groups. Services should be sensitive to the needs of BME groups and promote awareness of their health risk. The needs of BME groups should be specifically considered in providing and planning healthcare. We failed because it's all right to talk about socioeconomic status, but where is ethnicity in all of this? And unless we can have those frank discussions around ethnicity, race, and racism, very little is going to change. So I've started out with, oh dear, it's not that good. And then I've called the conference Seizing the Opportunity. So you think, well, Vivienne, where is the opportunity? If nothing else, the Workforce Race Equality Standard has placed race back on the agenda in the NHS. Roger knows that as a network, we said that the measurements is not right. Having carried out the first race equality review in the NHS, and I don't stand here on an ego trip, I just did, I cannot understand if you actually want to address what's happening to BMEs in the NHS, why you don't take the most significant number of BMEs being overrepresented in a band which actually is telling you they're not progressing. Why don't we measure it and look for real change? That being said, we've stated our position this year. That being said, it is still an opportunity for us to get engaged. I make a request to the BME staff here today, BME employees. This really is my request to you. This is the 4th conference I have organised for you. And I do it for you, and I say I'm not on an ego trip, I do it for us, because there's nothing else there. And so many of you email and tell me you're so excited. Somebody emailed me yesterday. No, did she speak to me? I had so many of you yesterday. And said to me, when she got her sign-off yesterday, her director or assistant director said to her, why do you have to go to the London Hilton Park Lane? Well, it's far cheaper than many of the conferences that are being held out there this year. Just look at the price, and look at the price here, which Janssen allows us to have. Why did I come to the Hilton Park Lane? I tell you for one reason. It was a Saturday when I walked in here, and I took the liberty of asking, would you host our conference? They told me to come back. I did. There's a reason why I do it. We don't value ourselves. We don't show that we should be valued. So many of you say it's a lot of money for the trust to send you. It is, but you don't get much else. So start believing yourself. Start believing that you should be valued. So my request to you, and I really want this to happen, and you can help me do the next conference next year. I've been to so many NHS organisations this year, and I have not been into an NHS organisation that's told me all is well. In fact, I often leave the organisation feeling very depressed because actually you're all so despondent. You all say it's not happening here, and you're right, it isn't. But my question to you is, what are you going to do about it? I went to an NHS organisation. The chief exec is a lesbian. She invited me in, and she said, as a lesbian, I've done a lot for the LGBT agenda here, Vivienne, in Brighton. I'm just going to go away, isn't Brighton? And she said, but I know I'm failing our BME staff. She said, would you help me set up a BME network in my trust? I said, yes. So we agreed that she would organise a meeting and she would invite me. But she was going to invite white British staff. And I said to her, that's not a BME network. That's an all-staff network. What do you want? A BME network or an all-staff network? She came to a meeting because they didn't know the ethnicity of all their staff. There were 5 white British staff in the room. She came into that room and she said, who's white British here? 5 put their hands up. She said, I'm going to ask you to leave because Vivienne's explained to me, I don't want an all-staff network, I want a BME network. But I'm really pleased that as white British staff, you come here today because you wanted to engage, you want to find out about it, so we would like to have you as BME champions, but you can't be a member of the BME network. So what's my request? We wrote to every chief exec this year to ask them to support 5 people to attend this conference. So if everyone had responded, just imagine how many people we would here today. But we're grateful to the chief execs that did actually say, yes, I am going to support your event. But my request to you as black and minority ethnic staff is, we need to strengthen our position as a network. The Workforce Race Equality Standard talks about a 3-year cycle of change. What we must not allow to happen is that, like with the Delivering Race Equality in Mental Health, a 5-year programme, they got to the end of the programme at 5 years and there was no change from the start to the finish. We need to assess what's happening in NHS organisations, and the only meaningful way that we can do that is if we have effective local BME networks. It's tough. I know it's tough. Come to Brighton, we'll tell you how tough it is. And in this room today is approximately 30, 40 BSUH BME network members. And I have to say to you, I've never done it. Thank you. Thank you for supporting me in Brighton. It's been difficult, it's not easy, but we have stood the course. We stand united in Brighton. And so when I go to your organisations, it's not easy. When I go to your organisations, I think, how can we replicate what's happening in Brighton? So my request, everybody that's here today from an organisation, I want us to set up a local BME network in your organisation. I want you to ask your chief exec, said you supported us to go to that conference. We're coming back. You've got to deliver on the workforce race equality standard, and we want to partner with you. Not against you, we want to partner with you so that you deliver on your obligations. The same happens for our BME patients. We're patients too. The health and well-being of our BME communities matter. And we've got to have an agenda to say how we're going to deliver healthcare that meets our needs. And it's not just about the network saying, well, how are you going to do it? It's how are we going to do it? And so in Brighton, you've got it in your manual, we came up with the reverse commissioning. All it is a recognition that you cannot have true partnership if your BME patients are not empowered and health professionals are not enlightened around this agenda. So you have to do a bit of work with each group before you bring them together. And for that, I want to thank the 3 chief execs that I approached last year, and I asked them, if I analyse your service data and we find that the mental health services that you're delivering to the black and minority ethnic community is wanting, will you pilot this project? Angela Hillary of Northamptonshire Healthcare said yes. Michael Scott of Norfolk and Suffolk said yes. Steve Trenchard of Derbyshire Healthcare said yes. And it's been a really humbling experience to go to these focus groups between health professionals and service users and watch it come together. Yes, if they can do it, everyone can do it. The 5-year forward view is what NHS England, well, all the partnership organisations, NHS England, Public Health England, Care Quality Commission, have set out their vision for changes required in the NHS over the next 5 years. Those changes are going to be major. Not time for me to go into that. They're going to be major, they're going to be challenges, they're going to be different. One size doesn't fit all. And if you look based on evidence, you know I'm a scientist by background, so it's all about the evidence. The evidence in the background tells you that every time the NHS goes through a major change, we lose out more than anybody else. This time, it's going to be different. But I can't do it on my own, the exec can't do it on her own, and the call today is for you to establish those local BME networks with our help to make us to be a voice that's recognised by the system. A couple of weeks ago, I was invited to speak at the King's Fund because the 5-year forward review talks about what everyone has to do to make it happen. And key to this is about system leadership. And I was asked to speak to leaders about, system leadership. What does it mean for the delivery of race equality? These are some of the features of system leadership. Vision and recognition that the system needs to be led. It comes about by an act of persuasion that needs to have an evidence base for change. We have more than evidence for change, more than enough evidence for change. Do you agree? Right, okay, so the change is required. Leadership which is shared, distributed, and adapted. I said to the leaders in the room, this is great, it makes sense, but tell me something. If you, at the top, are not persuaded that race equality should be a priority, how on earth do you think you are going to establish system leadership in your organisation when the top is saying it doesn't matter? If the BME staff feel so disengaged, you've got all of these subcultures in your organisation, how on earth are you going to engage your staff, those staff, to deliver results? You've got to build relationship. It requires the best, most diverse group of clinical leaders. Boy, is there a waste in the NHS with regards to BME talent. Accountability. It was interesting when I read the report, because I had it before it was released on the day. And it talked a lot about leaders needed to walk in other people's shoes, but never mentioned the word empathy. It is time to walk in our shoes and to see what it's like. It's not going to be easy. Having said all of that to you, you know my personal experience, most of you, and it doesn't stop. And if, when I die, somebody wanted to put something on my gravestone, I will tell you the worst experience I have had in my life is being in an employment tribunal, and I've been in 3. Right? It's not nice. I'm going to label it as my worst experience. But it's all about justice. And on every occasion, 2 occasions, the ruling was you've discriminated against her. The 3rd didn't, but the appeal, to sit in an appeal court, and a judge says, this looks like discrimination to me. All because you want justice. And in my call to you today, to stand with us, not hide behind the network, what are you as an individual going to do about it? I'll just say one more thing. When I go around to organisations, because I've done this for 10 years, you've got to accept that there will be BME people in your organisation that will work against you. That's just a fact. And whatever reason, whether they feel that that's their way to get on, just accept it. But don't let it hinder. They're in the minority. If you stand together, you can progress this agenda. Human progress is neither automatic or inevitable. Every step, and I mean every step, towards the goal of justice requires sacrifice, suffering, and struggle. The tireless exertions and passionate concern of dedicated individuals. Are you prepared to get on board this year, now that race is back on the agenda with the Workforce Race Equality Standard? And for that, we thank Roger, because he did do that exercise. He did actually, was instrumental in the standard coming about. Even what we said, that it's not quite right, I have, when I've written to Simon Stevens, said, if nothing else, race is back on the agenda. Let's not miss the opportunity. Thank you.